Today we have Julie Wall with us from the University of West London, who will be giving us a talk and answering some questions about deepfake speech. How is synthetic speech generated and what makes it convincing?
These are synthetic media, so they're generated using artificial intelligence. And their goal would be to mimic or alter real-world content convincingly. And I guess that would be the key term. They're trying to convince. And deepfakes can be applied to video. We're probably most familiar with video or images in terms of deepfakes, but there's also deepfake text, and speech is what I'm very interested in. And each of these types would have their own unique challenges and implications. If we think about speech, deepfakes involve the use of advanced AI models. And what they're trying to do is to replicate or generate entirely artificial voices that sound indistinguishable from human speech. How does it actually work is the technology is based on neural vocoders and other types of generative models. So a neural vocoder is a computer system or an AI model that converts a spectrogram into audio. Spectrograms are visual representations of the sound frequency from speech. So if we take a visual representation called a spectrogram, we can then convert that into audio. And there's two stages. So first of all, you would have your input text. So what do we want the synthetic speech to actually say? And then we use a synthesizer to convert that input text into a spectrogram. And the spectrogram is able to capture the rhythm, the pitch, and the tone of the intended speech. So what you're trying not to do is produce something that sounds very robotic. What you're trying to embed is that kind of the pitch and the tone of a natural human speaker. And then the next step would be a vocoder. So this is where you translate the spectrogram into a realistic audio waveform. And this is producing that final synthetic voice. So deep learning has, the big boom in deep learning over, gosh, it's what, 12 years ago now, more than that. This has given us architectures like GANs, generative adversarial networks, or autoencoders. And we use these deep learning technologies. We train them on very large data sets of voice recordings. And then through these large data sets, the models can learn the unique vocal characteristics of an individual. And again, it's all about embedding that tone, pitch, rhythm, and emotional nuances into the synthetic speech. It's particularly advanced in the last 5-6 years because it's able to create realistic voices using minimal input. So with the age of deep learning, it was that kind of a data-driven approach where you have huge data sets and you can get your model to solve a particular task with great accuracy. But the later models in producing speech, synthetic speech, they can clone a person's voice from just a few minutes. Or potentially even seconds of their initial audio recording. So it's very powerful. And these models are freely available online, open access models. There are some commercial ones as well, but there's a lot of open access models. So this type of technology is now becoming very accessible to experts and non-experts. But yeah, going back to the innovation in terms of the use of the neural vocoders, their key strength is that they're able to convey the emotional nuance of how we as humans communicate with one another, how we speak. So I mentioned that traditional text-to-speech systems, up until quite recently, they did sound very monotonous or very robotic, and it was immediately detectable that this is a synthetic speech. But these modern deepfake models, because they're able to replicate the really subtle variations in tone, how we emphasize different words when we're speaking, and in the rhythm in which we speak, now we're able to replicate the emotion of what it sounds, and that's why it makes deepfake speech sound so natural. And then these voices become more engaging, and that keyword again, they become very convincing. So we can have some great use cases for this technology, but it also increases the risk of the misuse of this type of technology when it becomes difficult or too difficult to be able to distinguish between the real and the fake. So yeah, it's kind of an exciting area. It's changing very rapidly, I would say.
That's great. What is the difference between deepfake audio and traditional voice synthesis or impersonation?
Yeah, I guess with human impersonation, this relies on an individual who naturally is trained to mimic vocal traits. Um, Deepfake audio is entirely machine generated. And, with all AI, even though you can mimic or clone a person's voice with just a few minutes of speech, in reality, the more data you have, the better quality. So with deepfake audio, you can achieve a level of precision and consistency that a human impersonator really could not achieve.
Are there some examples of positive applications of deepfake audio technology, like being used for accessibility, such as creating personalized synthetic voices for individuals with disabilities?
This technology is being used for very positive use cases, very positive beneficial applications. In terms of accessibility, we can use synthetic voices for individuals with disabilities. So the technology can be customized, especially for people who rely on assistive technologies. So people with speech impairments, they can use this type of AI to create personalized voices that closely match their own natural tone and accent. So it would give, or it can give, that individual kind of a sense of identity in how they choose to use this technology to communicate. And there are organizations out there that have developed solutions to generate unique voices for individuals. Again, there's open source and commercial type solutions for this. Other applications will be around language translation. So deepfake audio, the technologies underlying the construction of this synthetic deepfake, it can enable real-time voice translation. So this allows your voice to be translated into another language while retaining your own unique vocal characteristics. And that's very interesting in terms of communication across kind of global diplomacy, etc. It's being able to participate in a multilingual conversation with your own voice without having to worry about the translation side. I think that's quite powerful. This type of technology is becoming very common in the media and entertainment industry. So synthetic voices can help in dubbing films, creating voiceovers, or even if we think of reviving the voices of historical figures for educational purposes. And when we think about the entertainment industry, all of those kind of positive use cases, we can see there could be a flip side as well in terms of job losses, the ethical use of individuals' voices, etc. But if we think about it from a positive point of view, used in the correct way, this technology can be used in a similar way for education and training, making content more engaging. So by tailoring content to individual learners. So like we could have AI generated voices providing feedback in online courses or simulating real world interactions and language training, being able to converse in real time with a naturally sounding synthetic voice in learning different languages is a very powerful product, I would say. So yeah, there are very positive aspects of deepfake audio, but we do need to consider, the ethical use of these applications and then the safeguards that should be put in place to prevent their misuse.
Julie, what are the most pressing ethical concerns associated with speech deepfakes?
Yeah, like It is a very interesting technology. It's very exciting. But with all kind of emerging technologies, the primary ethical concern I would think would be their potential for misuse. So how are people using the technology, which can be fantastic, for like nefarious purposes? So one example could be voice phishing. So this would be kind of from a cybersecurity point of view. So voice phishing, or also known as vishing, so where the synthetic voice is used to impersonate trusted individuals. Um, so that would be kind of used in cases of fraud, and there's some good examples of that. There's some interesting examples of that. Speech deepfakes can also be used to spread disinformation or misinformation. They can be used to create harmful content, such as fake speeches that have been attributed to public figures. They can pose privacy concerns. So anyone's voice can be potentially cloned without their permission. So if by putting this particular podcast out, our voices are now available online, and this could be used as input to such a model. So yeah, fraud and impersonation is a big risk, and there are examples of that. Misinformation, so spreading false information or trying to manipulate public opinion, that is becoming a topic of discourse. It's becoming, we see it time and time again in the news, people talking about this. And then the privacy concerns, this would be, as an individual, this is something we really should be aware of. And, we need to know more about this as individuals.
How can speech deepfakes impact industries like media, law enforcement, and customer service?
Vulnerable and can benefit. So I think speech defects can have a kind of a dual-edged impact across these industries. So there's always positive, and then there's the negative side. From the positive side, deepfake can streamline production processes. As mentioned, dubbing movies or creating synthetic voices for audiobooks. Real-time immersive deepfake technology can be used to create kind of really immersive and interactive virtual events, bringing to life these types of historical figures, or deceased artists who can now kind of perform at live concerts. But yeah, in terms of the media, deepfake technology can be used to create fake interviews or fake responses. It can be used to alter audio recordings, and this misuse can really undermine trust in media and media sources. For example, you could have a news presenter or a live interview with a public figure, and that could be altered. So if viewers can't trust what they see and hear, if this becomes kind of common, then viewers won't be able to trust what they see and hear during live broadcasts or news reports, and this can be hugely problematic. In law enforcement, the synthetic voices, they really add a degree of complication to the forensic side of things. For example, with audio evidence verification, if someone claims that a recording is a deepfake, there needs to be effort made to prove the authenticity of that recording. And that's very challenging because we would need very robust detection methods to prove that something is real human as opposed to proving that something is fake. So it's both sides. It's forensically, we would need to be able to detect when evidence is fraudulent and also determine when evidence is authentic. Customer service, you mentioned. So many companies are using synthetic voices for virtual agents like chatbots. But these systems themselves are very vulnerable to deepfake attacks. So a synthetic voice could impersonate a customer or a representative or an employee and use it to access sensitive information. So with the emergence of this technology, we really need to have systems or approaches that can kind of mitigate these potential but also existing threats.
Julie, what safeguards or regulations do we need to prevent misuse of this technology?
In terms of like the safeguards, I think there are three ways we can go with this. We can go from a technical point of view. So through research, how can we develop systems to detect? Um, I think it's through laws or legislation is another area that kind of governments need to focus on. And then as individuals, we really need education um, to inform us as individuals about this kind of emerging threat in how this technology could be used. If we think about the technical side, I have a PhD student, Harry Maltby. He's a student at the University of East London, and he's trying to investigate how to detect the difference between a human voice and a deepfake voice. And what he has researched and what he has uncovered is that if we look at the frequencies in the deepfake speech, so if we look at those spectrograms, um, he has been able to uncover artifacts or features in the high frequency ranges, which can be used to determine whether this is a real human voice or a fake human voice. So he's doing a lot of analysis in trying to not just say this is human, this is fake, but why? What is a feature within, what are those artifacts? What is interesting about this signal that can lead us to say this is human and this is fake? So it's kind of he's approaching it from a kind of an explainability point of view. It's not just a system which says yes or no, but it's a system which is trying to investigate what are the differences in that kind of audio signal. So using that type of research and integrating it into detection systems that can provide kind of more security. But the existing security technologies should not be thrown away. These are kind of becoming more important than ever before. Something like digital watermarking has been around for a long time. This is a very nice, simple part of the solution. For example, it can implementing a digital watermark in a video stream. It can help to verify the authenticity of that live content, and the development of watermarks that are difficult to replicate by deepfakes. These can definitely serve as safeguards. And, authentication mechanisms, ensuring that voice commands or identities, that they're verified with multi-factor authentication. Again, hugely important. Using biometric data, such as voice and facial recognition, to ensure that participants in meetings, online meetings, or online videos are real. And again, it can prevent the malicious use or it can prevent access for unauthorized individuals, etc. So technology and using it appropriately can be part of the solution. In terms of the regulatory measures, there are varied approaches internationally to deepfake legislation. In some countries, particularly those with a kind of an authoritarian regime, they've taken a hardline approach by imposing outright bans on the creation and distribution of deepfakes. And these countries view deepfakes as a significant threat to social stability and state security. Other countries or states, kind of maybe more common in Europe and Asia, they focus on requiring a clear discourse when content is synthetic. So there will be requirements about including watermarks or a disclaimer to indicate that this content has been artificially created or generated. So this approach it balances freedom of expression with the need to protect the public from deception. Some jurisdictions are using existing laws, like data protection and privacy laws, to deal with deepfakes. For example, GDPR in the EU and the UK, this can be applied to deepfakes that misuse personal data, although it's not the primary focus of GDPR for sure. In the UK at home, I guess we are still in the process of developing a very firm legislative approach to deepfakes. There's a lot of discussions ongoing about incorporating deepfake regulations into existing laws on harmful online content and misinformation. So, for example, the Computer Misuse Act of 1990, this does cover unauthorized access to computer material, and this could be applicable to deepfakes. The Online Safety Act, which is now in force, but the provision of it will be applied kind of progressively throughout 2025. This is going to increase accountability for harmful online content, and this definitely will include deepfakes. So that's Online Safety Act is something to watch. Yeah, so it really depends across the globe how different countries are dealing with this from a regulatory point of view. And then going back to what I mentioned about public awareness, both individuals and organizations really need to be educated about the risks and the risks of deepfakes and what detection methods are out there available, both open source and commercially. So that education is critical. The standard security measures like multi-factor authentication, these should be reinforced to try and protect, especially for voice-based verification systems. We now have financial services, and we access our bank accounts through voice-based verification.
Yeah.
Using multi-factor authentication will really prevent impersonation in these types of cases. And, public education campaigns, these are needed to raise awareness and increase awareness about deepfake technology. How can we teach people to recognize potential deepfakes? And as the technology gets ever more sophisticated, it really is becoming more and more difficult to detect with the human ear that we're listening to a synthetic voice. So it is more about becoming aware and people becoming educated about the risks so that they can use these kind of different security measures to protect themselves. So yeah, I think education is a very strong one.
Are there any legal precedents or high-profile cases involving the misuse of speech deepfakes?
Yeah, it is, especially in the last maybe less than 5 years, say the last two to 3 years, there have been some kind of well-known cases, I would say. There's a very well-documented case from 2019, so it's actually 5 years now, where cyber criminals used a deep fake of a CEO's voice, and they used the voice to convince an employee to transfer I think $243,000 to an external account. So the synthetic voice mimicked the CEO's German accent and intonation, and they exploited the trust of the employee to commit financial fraud. So we have seen we're probably all very aware of examples where we've received text messages or emails. This is the next stage. And I think, it's really feeding on that individuals working in a company who will do what they're asked by somebody much higher up in the firm. So yeah, that's a very well documented case, I would say. In 2021 in the UAE, a bank in the UAE, they lost $35 million in a heist. So again, criminals use cloned voices to authorize transactions. We've seen recently in the UK over the last 2 years, various UK politicians' voices were stolen and then they were manipulated to spread disinformation. I've yet to see a kind of a high-profile legal case about this. I'm sure there are, but speech deepfakes is becoming kind of common, I would say, in political misinformation. And again, using this technology in this way, it really does undermine public trust. From the celebrity sphere, this year, Taylor Swift's likeness was cloned using deepfake technology, both her voice and her face. And it was used in an unauthorized way, of course, in fake endorsements and public statements. Again, you can imagine the impact of that. But deepfakes are trickling down to, the general public, like myself and yourself. In the US, again, in the last year or so, a high school principal, his voice was cloned by another teacher. And the cloned voice of that principal um, was created to say racist and anti-Semitic remarks. So you can imagine the impact of that. There will be severe reputational damage for that individual, the victim. Um, the psychological effect of it as an individual. It did go through to a legal case. But yeah, these kind of incidents, they really show that deepfake speech being used in a malicious way is not just for, political campaigns or, committing fraud against, stealing money from a financial services or a bank. It really has started to trickle down to, to the general individuals, which is quite scary.
Julie, what are the biggest challenges in detecting speech deepfakes and how are these being addressed?
As an academic, I'm very interested in the research that's going on in detecting speech deepfakes. But it is a continuous battle. I would definitely say it's kind of like a cat and mouse dynamic between the detection tools as the detection tools improve, the methods that are generating the deepfakes are becoming ever more sophisticated. So this is kind of similar to the antivirus wars a decade ago. We as individuals don't really think about antivirus anymore. It's just something that's built in. But 10, 15 years ago, it was very common and people would talk about it. We had to actively deal with it as individuals with our laptops, etc. So yeah, it is very much a cat and mouse dynamic. And detecting speech deepfakes, it's a challenging problem. These generative technologies like the neural vocoders, they are rapidly advancing. We've studied models such as the Melgan, a wave glow model. There's another one called a hi-fi GAN, and they excel at mimicking the nuances of human speech, particularly, as I mentioned, in that kind of low frequency range. And in that low frequency range, that's where much or most of the essential speech information resides. So by focusing on that part of the speech, this really makes the synthetic speech kind of indistinguishable to the human ear. And that's why as researchers trying to detect, we have to look at that high frequency area to see if we can see any artifacts that will help us to detect what is human and what is fake. I guess, yeah, I keep saying it's like a cat and mouse problem. As soon as they come up with a new technique or a new method for generation, then the research again has to follow behind it to try and detect that method. If we moving away from the research side, there are other challenges. So people are using social media a lot. Videos are shared across social media, and they're often, or things like YouTube, they're often low quality, and people are becoming very used to watching low quality social media content. And this actually makes it easier for the deepfakes to blend in so that when they are faced with a deepfake, it doesn't stand out as being obvious. And then the other challenge will be, I suppose, will be a research challenge as well, is the data. Deepfake detection tools, they really struggle to generalize across different generative methods and data sets. So that means that when you come up with a solution for one particular generative technology, you can't apply that solution necessarily to another generative technology. So it becomes a very detection, but it's like a bespoke method needs to be developed for each generative model, and that's very challenging. And there are challenges, what we call them challenges, competitions out there. So there's something called the AB Spoof Challenge, which has been running for about 10 years now. It runs every 2 years, and it's kind of an open chat. It's like an open call to the research community to come up with solutions to this. So every 2 years they've released a new data set, and then all the researchers are trying to come up with solutions. And every 2 years they kind of focus on different elements of the deepfake speech kind of domain. But yeah, that would be kind of a problem in that the solutions to detecting deepfakes don't necessarily apply to other generative methods. So there's, again, you're reinforcing that kind of cat and mouse. You're continuously having to come up with new solutions as the technologies become ever more sophisticated. So yeah, it's still a lot of it's an active research area, and it's 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 not mature by any at all yet.
How does detection of speech deepfakes differ from detecting video deepfakes?
Video deepfakes, they typically require more data, literally frames per second. There is more data available to analyze. And having a larger data footprint, it provides more opportunities for detection. So irregularities, they're often kind of spatially or temporally evident, and it's easier for humans to notice without using sophisticated tools. It can be easier. No, I'm not saying it's always easier, but it can be easier for humans to see problems with a video that they don't necessarily hear with audio. Again, speech deepfakes, they have a much smaller data footprint. So with less data, and much of that information is kind of compressed into the frequency spectrum. We mentioned that the generative methods are very sophisticated at generating that low frequency audio signal. So if there is any glitches or artifacts, they would be in that higher frequency part of the audio signal, which is a problem because we can't hear with the human ear now, because the synthesized voice is so human-like or so real that we can't hear it. So we have to use very sophisticated methods to detect. The data, you're absolutely right. There are other reasons. I mentioned if we use the word artifact. So from a video point of view, the artifacts we will be looking for will be visual. So we're looking at kind of unnatural eye blinking, very slight distortions in facial symmetry, jittering edges in the image or in the video, mismatched lip movements during speech. If we see these things, they're not a certain indicator that this is synthetic, but we as humans see these, they're very obvious to us. And these kind of anomalies arise due to limitations in the models, in the generative models, and how they're able to blend that synthetic content with the existing real world imagery. So when you're trying to blend fake and real in a video, it can be detectable with the human eye. Whereas, as I said, with speech, the artifacts are very difficult to hear with the human ear. What else? Yeah, I guess video, they can look at kind of frame by frame analysis and detect irregularities in like facial landmarks. How is the human face changing step by step? So using technology to investigate and analyze that, that's very doable. Lip syncing, again, doesn't necessarily mean that it's deep fake, but it's something that's easy to pick up. Yeah, I would say that deep fake speech is very difficult. It is a challenging problem. I would even say
So,
more
yeah,
challenging than the video.
what role does explainable AI have in building effective detection tools?
I'm a very strong advocate of explainable AI. I think where, especially when AI is being used to make decisions about individuals, I think we should be using an explainable approach. I think that's kind of um, a, a, a good place to start. So explainable AI is where we understand why why the AI has made a decision. So we're really trying to move away from that black box AI where the AI is given an input, something happens mysteriously in that black box, and then the AI makes a decision, and that decision is accepted. What we're trying to with explainable AI, it's not a black box anymore. So we can see into the box. So we've got transparency. We can see how the data is processed, and we can see what features in the data or what markers, what's important about that particular input that has led the model to make a particular decision. And it's very important. So in terms of the explainable AI for deepfake, it's being able to understand not only that a tool identifies the audio as synthetic, but also to explain the decision why. So, for example, this deepfake audio has been deemed to be deepfake, or this audio has been deemed to be deepfake because there are unusual patterns in the high frequency ranges. The rhythm or the cadence of the speech is irregular, and there are artifacts in the audio signal that differ from natural speech. This kind of transparency and this additional information is very valuable, especially in contexts like legal cases, fraud investigations, media verification. So where the end users or stakeholders, they need to understand and trust the system's findings. So using explainable AI in deepfake audio detection is very important. It helps to provide kind of very clear reasons for a detection, and then users can evaluate the evidence and make informed decisions. I think explainable AI also improves the tools themselves. So Harry's work, my PhD student's work, which is looking at investigating the features that the system is focusing on as a decision maker to say that this is deepfake or this is not deepfake, by understanding how the voices differ between human voice and deepfake voice. This can be used to help refine the model and make it actually more accurate and reliable going forward. So we talked at the very beginning about how, deep learning really focus on a data-driven approach. If you give an AI model enough data, it can tell the difference. But I think it's also just as important to understand the difference so that we can then use that information to improve the detection models. So it's explainable AI helps to build trust in those detection systems. It should make them easier to use, especially for non-experts. And I think without a clear explanation of why an AI has given a particular output, we really have to be very careful about whether we should have just accept it, or we can't really use that decision very effectively if we don't understand where the decision came from. So yeah, I think explainable AI is very important in this area.
Julie, where is the field of speech deepfakes headed in the next 5 years?
I could say anything here.
Yeah.
um, I think the deep fake technology is going to become even more advanced. But I also think it's going to become more widely accessible. So it's going to enable those applications like real-time translation, personalized voice or virtual assistants, and the outputs are going to become increasingly natural sounding, those synthetic outputs, even more than they are now. So I think with the advancements in this technology, there's going to be great benefits in fields like accessibility, entertainment, customer service. So that's, there are great positives. But I think this progress is going to make the detection of deepfake speech even more challenging. As the generative models improve, the detection models have to match that. The tools are probably going to become more affordable. There are already, open source tools that are freely available. There are commercial tools. I think the deep fake tools are probably going to become even easier to use. And again, this could be used this provides potential for misuse in terms of, there could be an increase in fraud, impersonation, and misinformation as these tools become very accessible. Yeah, so it is again that cat and mouse that as the tools evolve, become better at producing synthetic voices, the opportunities for beneficial applications will grow, but the opportunities for misuse will also grow at the same time. So we're just going to have to keep making sure that the detection tools will need to evolve. It was interesting you mentioned about we can use the detection of deepfake audio to help with videos. And yes, that the advances will likely or it will involve combining modalities. So looking at solutions for detecting fake audio, fake text, contextual metadata, the images, kind of combining them into kind of more sophisticated detection solutions is definitely something that will be an area of research for sure. Kind of collaboration across the discipline. So it's not just about individual AI researchers or AI companies, but taking inspiration and taking expertise from like the linguistics, the field of linguistics, cybersecurity, law enforcement, kind of having an interdisciplinary approach will definitely help to address kind of emerging threats, and will also ensure that this type of technology is actually used in a more responsible and ethical way. That if, we do have generative technology now creating synthetic speech, having insight from different disciplines will definitely ensure that the technology is used in a better way. So yeah, I see the next 5 years, it's going to be great innovations, but we need to become better with the safeguarding against its misuse.
What can individuals or organizations do to protect themselves from speech deepfakes?
I think from an individual point of view, what we can do is limit the public sharing of our voice recordings, not stop it, but really limit the amount of data that we share online. Really consider whether it's for personal social media reasons, if it's for work reasons, do we need to have that video online? So that's something that we can definitely do to reduce the likelihood of voice cloning. We should be cautious during interactions, especially where voice-based verification is part of it, that involves voice-based verification. We as individuals, we need to stay informed about the latest development in deepfake technologies, and what it actually means for an individual. How can we be duped or tricked and try and become aware, so that we can be prepared. Even like listening to examples of synthetic speech to see, can we detect it with our human ear? And as I said, as the technologies are becoming ever more sophisticated, it is becoming very difficult to detect. But just trying to become familiar with the type of files that are being developed, the type of audio files, looking at the fake videos to see what features could we be aware of? So yeah, for individuals, it's definitely educating ourselves about the risks. How can we prepare it? And just thinking, do we need to share that video or that information about ourselves online? The less information you put online about yourself is always the first step in keeping yourself safe, I guess. For organizations, it's again more challenging, but it is about implementing robust detection systems, and integrating those pre-processing techniques that I talked about that my PhD student is looking into, to help improve accuracy, investigate the solutions that are out there, whether they want to try and incorporate a bespoke or an open source solution, or do they want to investigate or buy a commercial kind of more bespoke solution. It really depends on the type of company and the size of the company. But there are options out there. And definitely not throwing away that multi-factor authentication method. That's becoming more important than ever before. So, using the requirement of PIN numbers or biometric data alongside voice verification, those extra layers of security are really critical. Training staff to recognize the signs of synthetic audio, training staff to, recognize subtle artifacts in the background. That's important. But as the technologies become more sophisticated, it's really about using those extra layers of security and not relying on an individual modality like voice verification to be the solution. So yeah, there are safeguards. And I do think both individuals and organizations need to be proactive and adopt measures to try and keep themselves as safe and secure as possible. The AI Act in Europe is really focused on the security of individuals. There's some aspects of that act that people find very problematic and other people find it fantastic, such as a company developing AI. They are now not just responsible for the first use of the AI, but they are also responsible for third-party users using their models for nefarious purposes. So if we can take it in good faith, it's about developing AI in a very ethical, good practice way. Not all AI, it's about maybe slowing things down and doing things in a better way, being more careful about the data that's being used, who is actually going to be impacted on this. Does this particular AI model need to be developed now? So I think, whereas in the UK, my understanding is that there is a more of a balance between encouraging innovation and in commercial activity, in financial services, in industry, and that the legislation is more of the safeguards in the UK seem to be more of a discussion between trying to get companies to work in good practice, rather than using laws as a more surer way of safeguarding us. So I just generally think that it depends on the country you're living in and what their approach is. But we all know that laws are always going to be behind technology. Laws are being developed to deal with the technology. So there's always going to be that gap. And similar to the detection systems, those are always going to be developed in response to the generative models that are being developed and used. So I don't think we can rely on legislation alone to protect us as individuals or organizations from deepfakes. I do think it needs to be kind of a trifecta of the research has to happen, the legislation has to be there in some way, and we as individuals, the general public, we need education and ways of keeping ourselves secure using that kind of multi-factor authentication, etc. So I think a law is not going to solve the problem. There has to be a multifaceted approach, I would say.
Thank you, Judy. We really appreciate the time you've taken to help enlighten us on this new technology.